Why the H3 Leftovers podcast will never return by North Star Radio.
In 2021, Hasan Piker.
That's very patronizing. Yeah, I am being patronizing. I don't know who the
Hold on.
you are, and you're over here chirping all the way from London about Palestine.
The biggest political Twitch streamer on the platform was blowing up in popularity, thanks in large part to his coverage of the 2020 presidential election following his controversial departure from the Young Turks.
America deserved 9/11, dude. I'm saying it.
At the same time, ethanklein.
Yay! What?
One nacho grande with extra beef, extra cheese.
Okay.
Host of the biggest live podcast in the United States, was also blowing up in popularity, thanks in large part to Trisha Paytas and the falling out of their friendship, as well as their incredibly popular yet controversial podcast, Frenemies.
Ela says, don't talk about me on the podcast. All I said was just shove the guest. He's like, we can't mention Ela. She doesn't want me to talk about, oh, she's too good for a podcast, even though we were talked about. They never once consulted me at the beginning of the spring. She has a podcast. I brought life to the nature.
Given the increased popularity of left-wing politics at the time, after the grand finale ending of the Trump presidency, these two controversial chronically online men decided to team up once and for all to bring to the internet the greatest political podcast of all time, that being the H3 Leftovers podcast.
That's right.
Years went by, delivering to knowledge-hungry young people the tools they need to build a better future for themselves and their communities. But this all came to a screeching halt when one catastrophic event took place in historic Palestine on October the 7th, sparking hours upon hours of what at first seemed to be productive discussion, but what soon turned into quite childish one-sided debate.
If people are mad about that, it's probably because of the timing.
There's no timing placed on a group of people's emancipation. There's no, like,
Bro,
my
Their timing matters. It's just this one point I'm trying to make. You can't cheer on Hamas, dude.
The flames grew higher and higher until it was eventually too much for ethanklein, causing the Leftovers podcast to fall off the face of the earth with seemingly no announcement. This is what happened to the Leftovers podcast. And this is why the Leftovers podcast will never return. Going back all the way to the beginning of the H3 podcast, politics was always being discussed.
He called you and Ethan terminally online. I mean, he's not wrong. Also, I think North Star is a really interesting subject because he's a great content creator in and of himself, like as a standalone content creator. But I find it really funny that I think he like became a fan of mine because he watched me on watched me talk to Ethan the first time Ethan ever had me on his podcast before Leftovers. Dude, absolutely wild. You're about to talk about Ethan and Leftovers right now. I feel like you never mentioned him, or since it ended, I'm kind of in disbelief right now. The reason why I choose not to talk about like Ethan or Leftovers or anything like that is because I think it instills a lot of parasocial emotions in a lot of people. And that level of like parasocial behavior ends up being unproductive because there's no, like, people literally bring up Ethan when I'm talking about Israel Palestine, when in my assessment it's like he is not even meeting the standard of like content creator who is across the board a content creator who's like across the board against most of the things I believe in. I personally don't even care if he's like calling me out or whatever. I heard that like people were saying that Ethan talked about me on his podcast today or some shit like that. I don't care. I genuinely don't care. For me, you know what I do care about? Ethan considering what Israel's doing to be genocidal far before October 7th. I do care about that. I think that matters, especially when he is so close to the subject matter, so close to the different aspects of social conditioning that play a pretty prominent role in the development of American Jews, who are very progressive people overall. And no matter what he says about me, my community, or my mods, I still firmly believe, okay? I still firmly believe that regardless of everything else, regardless of how he's responded to people yelling at him online, regardless of all of that, I place a lot more emphasis and a lot more value on those things that he has said. Because when people say like, oh, he's being Islamophobic. Yes, there are definitely instances where he said things that are Islamophobic. Okay, both in the past and even recently. I think you guys forget that I myself am also Muslim. So when he does that, it's not like a dehumanization that doesn't feature me at all. It does. But like I said, time and time again, it ultimately doesn't change this dynamic. It ultimately doesn't change my understanding of the situation. He's also going after Frogan, though, right now. Just don't get upset when H3 Dorks brigade this channel after reacting to this. Well, what's really interesting about that is that I think his community is probably more pro-Palestine than even he might be. I don't know how to communicate this. Like, I think his audience probably is more at odds with him on this issue than he suspects.
Jordan Peterson came on the podcast 2 times in the early days of his rise to fame.
You guys know who Jordan Peterson is? He's like a psychologist or something, but he's
a scholar.
He's a scholar.
He's a really smart guy.
It's a very strange story in many ways because Hitler was obsessed with order and cleanliness. He was a very orderly person. He was very sensitive to disgust, because you think, well, the Nazis were afraid of the Jews.
This entire drama fest started because Destiny viewers tried to pit your viewers and Ethan and his viewers against each other. It worked. They continue to do this every day. And this chat constantly falls to the bait. Yeah, exactly. And it is also because there is a real, genuine parasocial desire from people who consume a lot of this content, whether it be just Ethan or myself or both, to like constantly cover a issue of real geopolitical significance, an issue of genocide, but from this incredibly narrow framing of like, what does this content creator think about this other content creator? As I always say, drama makes boring subject matter incredibly consumable.
Because they were other, and that's not right. What's more accurate is that, especially Hitler, he was very sensitive to disgust. That's what it looks like. If you're disgusted by something, then you want to eradicate it. Right? If you're afraid of something, you want to run away from it. If you're disgusted by it, you want to burn it to the damn ground. You want to get rid of it.
Andrew Yang came on the podcast 2 times in the early days of his rise to fame. And in the post-Trisha timeline of the H3 podcast, political discussion shifted drastically to a more supportive, inclusive understanding of the ever-changing world around us.
This guy is the peace and love guy.
There's no such thing as trans people. That's something that you created. So have fun with your little dreamland, but that shit's not real.
Take it from me, a dude who's never known a gay person.
Penis? Dude. Vagina? Girl, done.
Slam dunk.
Come in here with that fucking
We got him again. Slam dunk. Penis, vagina. Boom, boom.
But it wasn't until one fateful day when Ethan Klein and the H3 podcast decided to dive into the deep end of the online sphere of political commentary. That day was the beginning of the end for Steven Crowder.
Oh, there he is. Oh no, Sam Cedar. What a fucking nightmare.
But before this was released on the H3 podcast channel, 10 months after Hasan Piker made his first appearance on the H3 podcast, Ethan Klein made his first ever appearance on the Hasanabi broadcast to promote the release of this once-in-a-lifetime debate.
Boys, girls, Ethan Klein to the H3 podcast.
Are you pretty hyped up on the Crowder?
Oh my God, I'm so hyped up, dude. I'm so excited. Are you wearing holsters right now?
Yeah, yes. We're all wearing holsters.
Now, was the debate any good? Not really. They certainly got Steven Crowder to admit to quite a bit, like running away from past debates with Sam Cedar.
You're so clever. I had no idea that you were taking your show off early last time, coming in today.
He admitted that he followed the show last week.
We got him.
He admitted that he watched the show last week.
We got him. Dude, we played him so hard because he literally was following. He saw that you went live, dude. We got him.
Oh my God, we
nailed him.
But most of the debate was pretty anticlimactic.
I have a general
This is a
rule.
great opportunity.
I don't start a debate based with people on a lie. And how about you get
sabotaging?
How about you get
Stephen,
to a
show
30th
yourself,
of the
you
audience
coward.
share?
Stephen, show yourself. Don't show your co-host.
Ethan, you should show
Stephen,
yourself.
Ethan, how can you respect yourself as a man, brother?
Stephen, you are such a coward. Stop showing your little leprechaun co-host who comes out dressed like your sidekick.
Come on, Ethan, why do you have to bring on a
Show
guy who-
Stephen!
Despite the debate's disorderly nature, it sparked something in the mind of Ethan, a yearning, a craving. He had one tiny droplet of debate pervertry, and he couldn't go back.
Oh, God. You look back on these clips with sadness or joy, kind of reminds me of looking back at photos of friends I'm no longer associated with, and it just feels like a massive void. No, I don't. No, dude, I'm happy. Listen, instead of being sad that something ended, why not be happy that it happened to begin with? You know, that's the way I look at it. It's like the DNC. Listen, I never in a million years would ever think that I would become one of the largest content creators on any platform, okay? As a political commentator who has opinions that are completely outside of what is considered normal and good in American political discourse, I never thought that I would get to this position. So I don't take that shit for granted at all, okay? I'm very fortunate. I talk about it all the time. I probably should talk about it more frequently, to be honest. Like, that's why I hype up Ethan and hyped up Ethan quite a bit as well. Because, like, regardless of what he had done in the past, like, he is a person who truly changed. And I do believe it. I think that was legitimate. I think that was genuine. A lot of people try to ascribe, like, cynical motives to people doing things like that, where it's like, oh, he couldn't be edgy anymore, that's why he did it. Like, I don't think so. I think it was a genuine change of heart. And so, you know, if someone is capable of doing that, if someone is capable of experiencing that level of growth on their own, especially as a content creator, when they could have very easily probably continued doing exactly the type of shit that they were doing, and also keep farming, you know, the right as much as they wanted to, then yeah, I'm gonna think about that differently. Like, it changes the calculation a lot.
Day and night, week after week, ethanklein was not only debating the greatest of the great, but was winning in said debate.
No, I think it's more so for women pick violent men more than men pick violent women.
Based on what? Do you feel that sometimes you argue from emotion rather than like concrete facts? I feel this to be true. Do you feel you do that a lot or no?
I'm a woman, so sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Interesting defense.
You done with that shit? Can we talk like adults now or not?
I think this conversation has kind of been exhausted.
People would rather watch me full screen cam do the worm
Do
and watch
that.
your prime.
Bro,
watch your
do
prime
it for a
content.
week. Do a week of no reaction content and see how many views you get. Oh, he's crying in the corner.
No, he's not. He's not crying in the corner, Ethan. He is deploying the most powerful counter debate tactic known to man. That's right. I want you to see it for all of its glory. That is, ladies and gentlemen, the worm. Absolute cinema peak. Okay? No one has ever so thoroughly destroyed another interlocutor in the marketplace of ideas before or after this.
Okay, sure.
He went up against world-class greats. People like a 20-year-old dropshipper,
I'm just trying to flex on you guys.
But why?
I'm trying to show you guys what's up.
a printer salesman,
All day when you need a printer.
a character from the Asian version of Get Out,
I identify as Korean.
a Quebecois,
A carrot.
and even a man from the Nexium cult.
I got on the bus and they made an announcement about my Tourette syndrome. And earlier in line, a lady had heard me saying some inappropriate words. And she stood up and she said, well, how come he can say this word?
Okay, that one was actually pretty well done.
Let me, I have a theory for you.
I'm ready.
Okay, cool. I think you actually fake having Tourette's. Yeah, I think you actually don't have it. Here's my
Austin was wild for that day. Austin just walked in, by the way.
Let me just break it down. I think this is kind of a funny thing. I doubt this is what happened, but maybe you just called someone the N-word on the bus, and then you're like, oh, no, I have Tourette's. As somebody with Tourette's, I actually have Tourette's. I know it's not curable, so I just find that claim to be absolutely a pseudoscientific, crazy claim that has no backing in science or at all. And I think you're actually, in my opinion, as someone with Tourette's, I think you're scamming people.
Did you say that you have Tourette's?
I do have Tourette's.
I didn't know
that crazy. Yeah, I know. That's why I was so surprised when you emailed me, because I was like, I have Tourette's. And what's interesting too, I've also talked about how much I hate Keith and Nexium and what a psycho he is. So when I got your email, I was like, this is incredible, and I could totally see how it is you fell into a cult, because you clearly don't do any research.
Mind you, this was all taking place in the same timeline of the Leftovers podcast. They began the show on September 26, 2021, and Hasan Piker, but I'll call him Piker, seemed a bit uncomfortable at first, just getting the feel of the room and his ability to speak at will. This also wasn't a brand new podcast, rather a brand new show on an already existing podcast, so it makes sense it'd be a little challenging for Hasan Piker to just jump right in. But after only a few episodes, everything was perfect. I had already been radicalized by Hasan in 2019 and 2020, but the partnership of my two favorite creators only grew my passion for politics even more. So during this time, Ethan and Hasan are becoming best buds. They do a weekly show together. Ethan comes on the Hasanabi broadcast again. Hasan visits the H3 podcast again to help in the interview of Liver King. And during this time, Ethan is participating in debate after debate. And Hasan is watching these debates on his stream, supporting Ethan in his performance as friends do. Hasan would even text Ethan talking points during the debates.
This is from last year. It says, what the F is happening with gay people? 10 years ago, everyone called them F words, the F slur for gay people in high school, and today 1 in 6 high schoolers claim to be gay.
1 in 6, so yeah, it's continuing. More and more people.
So do you miss the days when we could call gay people the F word?
No, I just think it's surprising. I think it's crazy that that's happened. It's been such a popular trend lately.
Yeah, but that's not true either, is it?
No, it is.
What's your data?
My cousins that are in high school. I've talked to my cousins in high school.
Is data?
Strangers. People liked that video and commented on it and said the same thing.
Oh, that's data. Never mind. Ethan got to bust out the left-handed. The number of people who are left-handed.
The amount of left-handed people back in the day was really low.
I sent it back.
People left-handed were seen as inferior, and they were forced to use their right hand more often. But as it became more acceptable and people realized left-handed people weren't demons, then the amount of left-handed people increased, and it became steady at what, like 10% or something?
12%.
12% is left-handed. It went up astronomically all of a sudden. Would you say people choose to be left-handed?
I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, but that'd be silly. Why would you?
You don't know anything about anything, and yet you still chirp on it. Why not chirp on this too?
But little did Hasan know, he was feeding the thing that would eat him.
I don't know if it's like that. I don't think it's like that.
He was flying too close to the debate pervertry's sun, and all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, Ethan, sitting there with a very large debate ego, turned around to face towards Hasan and said,
"Allow me to debate the master."
2 months before the abrupt ending of the Leftovers podcast, Ethan Klein was having some moral quandaries about his devotion for capitalism, where he enjoyed the freedom that came from capitalism, the ability to succeed from nothing that came from capitalism, but was disheartened by the inequality that capitalism fosters.
I know that I'm a capitalist, so I've been trying to think, like, how do you square that with my other, like, socialist ideas? Like, I think the government should have guaranteed jobs for people that want to work, that pay enough for the minimum amount needed to have shelter and food. First of all, I think it's like the natural inclination of some people. Like, I don't think it's even realistic to say, I want to live in like a perfect communistic society, because that just doesn't work. It's antithetical to human nature. But I do think there are good things of capitalism provides, which is, I do think there's a sense of innovation that happens when people are motivated by money and pushed to, you know, do certain ideas. I don't hate the idea of like people who can be successful. I think it's good. I think that capitalism is a more realistic system of governance than like fucking communism is, you know. Communism never works because people are inherently corrupt, and whoever's in charge they're gonna be greedy, they're gonna be corrupt, they're gonna fuck everything up. It doesn't make sense. Like, it's almost like weird virtue signaling to be like, I'm living in modern day America, but I want a full communist revolution. I'll take on humanity, dude. I am a capitalist. What do you want? You know what I mean? Yeah, and I think but the thing is, like, they think that like workers should share in the, workers should get a % of your earnings, essentially, a percentage of their production. I don't agree with that. You're watching a capitalist pig. Deal with it. You guys are all like radical communists? There's that many radical communists?
They're not radical communists. Not everybody that's anti-capitalist is a communist.
It is kind of a radical take, that being.
So this is like, I think this should be a pretty good indication of like Ethan's community, at least like those who are chatting in his chat. Because it's not like I was watching him during this, or it's not like I was streaming during the, I mean, it's not like I wasn't streaming during this. Like, I was probably doing, at the same time as this was happening, I was probably streaming my own shit. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who don't agree with Ethan on certain issues that still enjoy his content. And that's perfectly valid, you know? And the way I still see Ethan is like, I think he's a passionate guy who sometimes has a capacity to fucking, you know, fly off the handle a little bit. That's why he's got the button, right? And that in the heated moment, he says a bunch of stuff, and he will sometimes even repeat these things, but ultimately as far as I can tell, his heart is in the right place. Like when he said you're fostering a community of anti-Semites, yeah, I don't agree with that. Like, I think that's I mean, it's hurtful. It's completely untrue. And it sucks to hear, but it is what it is, you know?
And it's like full anti-capitalist. I mean, you're essentially advocating to change the entire structure of all societies today on Earth. That's not radical?
Do you think democracy is a good thing, and do you think democracy is what helps prevent?
Yeah, but obviously our democracy isn't perfect either.
Right.
You know.
But you think ultimately that being a democracy, living in a society that votes and has, you know, the people agree on who should represent us and who should lead us is something like, that's a better system than, like, say, China, right? Where they have a council of elites and somebody is elected from within, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what if we ran companies that way?
On the following Wednesday episode of the H3 podcast.
That's the other side of this, is that like there are a lot of people that work there that don't necessarily agree with him either. And he, like, the very fact that he trusts everyone in his production team, especially Dan, regardless of their difference in opinion, I think it also is, you know, it's another reason why I'm 100% confident that he wouldn't do like a right heel turn. Like,
Ethan once again brings up the capitalism discussion, stating that he's been thinking a lot about it and is looking forward.
Hasan has cultivated a community of anti-Semites or some shit like that. That would be weird if he said that, but with Ethan, it's maybe less severe in terms of the familial bond. But yeah, it's a good analog. It's a good way to it's a good way to analyze the situation. Did Ethan even say that, or are you just saying that he implied that? I don't know what he said. I haven't watched any of his like takes on me or anything else. People in the chat are saying he said that today, which, you know, it is what it is. What are you going to do? I mean, it's just patently false, and it's sad to hear that, but it's definitely, it hurts my feelings to hear that, because it's something that I do care about a lot.
To a further discussion with Hasan on the following Thursday.
Last week was the capitalism versus socialism week. But I have to tell you, I want to talk about it more tomorrow because I've been thinking a lot about it.
Great.
I do. I mean, that's what Thursday is for, right?
That's what Hasan's there for. You can talk about it with
Call me
him.
ass, grifter, dog shit, moron, motherfucker.
All right, chill, dude. To be clear, I'm not a capitalist. I'm a social democrat.
Okay.
I think that distinction is important because people lose their fucking mind when I say, like, you know, I'm a capitalist. They just think that I'm like some fat cigar smoking boot on the worker's face, grind him into dust. You know what I mean? I'm a social democrat, motherfuckers. Recognize, bitch. But actually, I am looking forward to tomorrow because I have been thinking about it quite a bit.
Going into the discussion, Ethan had one overarching question.
What is it that social democracy can't achieve that socialism can? That's my question.
Okay. Let's talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Now, does Ethan actually want the answer to this question? Does he actually want to learn? Or does he simply already have an opinion on the subject he is willing to argue for hours? Yes. Ethan prefaces the discussion by saying he's excited for the conversation, as he's been doing a lot of research. That research being talking to ChatGPT.
I want to better represent my position because I don't really know a lot, and I feel like I've done a lot of research in the week following.
Let the conversation
So,
begin.
What did you do? What did you read? What kind of research did you do?
I had a very in-depth conversation with ChatGPT.
Respect. Okay. That's good.
I asked it really kind of.
Well, Ben Shapiro thinks it's socialist, like ChatGPT socialist. So
Right.
like ChatGPT probably
ChatGPT
Lenin.
is so
Right,
real.
yeah.
Yeah.
ChatGPT keeps it so real. You don't even
Yeah,
know.
ChatGPT Lenin pilled you.
They focus this discussion on a few distinct questions or quandaries Ethan is having with capitalism, and he's not as willing to learn as he originally made it seem.
And the labor class
I
still
feel like that's
exists.
an assumption. I don't know that that's true.
They first discuss his overarching question. What can socialism achieve that social democracy cannot?
So let's talk about this. Now, my first question is this. Given that, you know, in a social democracy, we can regulate things like taxes, housing, higher education, sharing jobs, and all this kind of stuff, what are the problems in social democracy that we need socialism to address?
So social democracy is still capitalist with you know, serious, severe market regulations, right?
Mm-hmm.
The issue is twofold. One, social democracies don't address some of the domestic problems because when there's still capital accumulation.
So which domestic problems?
Domestic problems such as labor issues, homelessness, like there's no way to fully eradicate that because the inherent class contradiction between the owner class and the labor class still
I feel like
exists.
that's an assumption. I don't know that that's true. That there's just going to be, there's not going to be homelessness in socialism, but there will in social democracy.
Well, the idea is that completely abolishing the profit motive in certain commodities like housing, for example, will address that problem because then you're making housing specifically for need rather than so you can make money off of existing units.
But we acknowledge that in a social democracy,
I think one of the craziest parts about this conversation was that there were, again, charlatans who we know are fans of goblin porn, okay, who tried to make it seem like I didn't do a good enough job explaining certain subjects to a person who was like being, you know, somewhat contentious under the guise of curiosity. And that is like one of the most annoying things because a lot of people don't actually just like look at a thing and let it sit and just analyze it with their own opinions. and they need someone to handhold them through this process. This has happened a couple different instances in my political career.
Run, ideally, the homeless and whoever else needs a home for whatever reason would be provided one. So I don't understand what socialism does better in that case.
At the end of the day, these countries, the social democracies that we were talking about, still have a lot of wealthy individuals, a lot of people who are making money off of finance capital and capitalism in general. And their interests are always going to be to further erode the welfare state as best as they possibly can in an effort to claw back all of those areas that they could still technically privatize.
You're putting that on them, but that's not, if you have a strong social democracy, that wouldn't be possible.
Ethan then asks another.
That's not true. And that is happening in Europe, all around Europe, where when there was a counterbalance like the USSR, when capital owners were truly afraid of too much labor momentum turning the tide of capital, they actually made concessions to allow the welfare state to exist. But now that there is no USSR, now that there is no counterbalance, look at all the European states. They've lost so many aspects of their welfare state. People have become increasingly more reactionary. Fascist ideology is rising.
Question he's quite unwilling to hear the answer to. Are workers still being exploited if all their needs in housing, food, and healthcare are being met?
Worker exploitation seems to be at the heart of socialism and communism. Yes. And so I want to ask you this question. If an employee is fairly compensated, and by fairly I mean factors like work, compensation, they're being paid well beyond the means of living. If they're provided in all those ways that we see as important, is that still exploitation?
In the Marxist perspective, under Marxian economics, Marxist theory, exploitation is not a good or bad thing. It is just a thing that happens.
Okay.
And it goes back to something I've described many, many times over. There are two classes. There is the labor class, the wage laborers, the proletariat, and the bourgeois class, the capital owning class, right? Mm-hmm. And these two classes have two inherently contradictory interests. As someone who worked, you wanted to work the least amount of hours for the most amount of pay. Your boss, on the other hand, wants you to work the most amount of hours for the least amount of pay. This inherent contradiction is at the heart of capitalism and is how commodities are produced under a capitalist mode of production. When you have this imbalance, those who do have capital end up always being able to pay you much less than your actual output.
So that is what's happening now. So is it still exploitation of workers if they're fairly provided for?
Yes. Because there is no fairness in that situation.
Because the fairness in this regard is not met on the metrics of living standards, but instead on the metrics of what their output is.
If the employee is extremely satisfied, and they feel well provided for, who are you to tell him he's being exploited?
Ethan continues in his failure to learn and brings up a similar question in the field of workers' rights. Why should workers be given democracy in the workplace in the form of decision-making and profit sharing when they themselves did not create the business?
I want to give you a specific example because this is interesting to me. Let's just take this workplace as an example, because we're all familiar with it. I started my career 10 plus years ago, and I was successful by myself with 0 employees. I made a lot of money, did well for myself, and then, 5 years ago into my career, I made the podcast, which obviously you all are watching now. Let's say we go back to 5 years ago when I hired Dan as a freelance. You started as like a consultant.
Yeah, or a freelancer, yeah.
And obviously you moved to full-time, and I'll get to that. So he started as like a freelance consultant. What would be a fair way of compensating him for that?
And when Hasan gives him an answer, Ethan no longer wants to talk about it.
I just want to know how the socialist workplace works. It seems so nebulous when you talk about it.
Why is it? I don't think it's nebulous at all.
There's gotta be. Okay,
I have a living, breathing, working example of it that I've given you.
I know, but there's got to be a constitution that says, outlines, or I don't know, whatever the fuck you want to write, right? There's got to be something, and it says or rule laws that says, this is the minimum that a person should get from the company.
Yes. And it should be married to the output. It should be married to the productive forces. It should be married to the output. That should be pegged.
We talked about this enough, though. I don't want to bore people.
That should be pegged to the performance. And I think that that is the best possible way to work.
I guess my problem on that is like, how could you possibly
enforce that?
No, not even enforce. How could you possibly even analyze that? Like, how much more money are we making because the janitor comes?
That's where we go to the Walmart example. That like we are already completely aware of that. We have actuaries, we have CPAs that are working in real time, making mathematical equations to figure out exactly what not to pay people technically, and they could be in a total social reorganization. The economy with a socialist dogma would work in the opposite direction.
Okay,
it's kind of like this.
Please, let's move to another topic.
Okay,
I don't want to bore people.
All in all, this episode was very entertaining, despite some frustrating moments from Ethan. And it even went an hour longer than usual, given how entertaining and important of a conversation it was. This Leftovers episode was definitely not a contributing factor to the conclusion of the Leftovers podcast, but it definitely was a sneak peek for what's to come. Ethan's debate pervertry ego had reached a point of no return, a final form in which Ethan could not be incorrect. So after a few weeks had passed of some pretty normal episodes of the Leftovers podcast, something catastrophic took place, once again sparking the need for discussion on the Leftovers podcast.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jim Sciutto in Washington. It is now 4 a.m. in Gaza, where Israel is striking back at Hamas targets after these attacks we saw play out over the last 24 hours. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country is at war. The militant group launched an unprecedented early morning attack, series of attacks on Israel, firing at least 5,000 rockets. Israel says at least 300 Israelis are dead, more than 1,500 wounded. This was not just rocket attacks, though. The terror group overran border.
They are underdeveloped and they're not underdeveloped. They are overexploited.
Crossings invaded by sea, by air, and by land, taking over entire Israeli communities in the south. We must warn you, many of these images are graphic and frightening.
However, leading up to this episode, Ethan has some initial discussion of the October 7 attacks on October 9th.
So over the weekend, Hamas, who is the governing, they're an organization, but they're also control Gaza Strip. They somehow managed to put together this surprise invasion of into Israel, and it was it was horrific. So far, at least 700 Israelis, which is nuts. One of the crazy things was there was a nature party, a peace party, they actually call it, ironically, and I guarantee a lot of people there were pro-peace, who are anti Netanyahu and all that kind of stuff. And so
yeah, for sure, they were all young. Definitely that type of crowd that is unhappy with the government.
The really sad kind of crazy thing is that, I don't know if this has changed, but last that I heard, Hamas didn't even know about the party. They just happened upon it.
This discussion was pretty tame, and mostly understandable coming from two Israelis after such a catastrophe took place.
Ethan is not even technically Israeli, for the record. I don't think. Like, Ethan went on birthright, no? I don't think he's Israeli.
Ethan even made sure to make his stance clear about the Israeli government. Not by speaking from the heart, but by reading a tweet of a note.
No. He did. He has citizenship. He lived there, but he went on birthright. I think his parents might be. I don't know. I actually don't even know. Holy shit! I should know this.
WhatsApp screenshot from 2021.
You know what? Let me do this. Before I even talk about this, let me just tell you, first of all, just so it's not ambiguous about how I feel about this situation as a whole. Okay? Let me just say this. I tweeted this. I think this was when the IDF blew up some apartment building or some horrific shit in Gaza a few years ago. I said the Israeli government's making me sick. Even if Hamas is operating as civilian buildings, it doesn't justify the total destruction of that building. It's inhumane. Netanyahu's a piece of shit warmonger. It needs to go. As a dual citizen, I love Israel and the Israeli people. They deserve a government that actually believes in peace and not force and violence. The ultra-right Jewish settlers among the greatest provocateurs in the world.
This is in
They're
May
shameless,
15,
hateful,
2021, Chad.
fueled by
Remember
religious
that.
zeal and enabled by the Israeli government. I wish the settling and repositioning of Palestinian land would stop. I wish the bombing in Gaza would stop. Gazans deserve to live a life free of fear. For all the crimes Hamas has committed, we must always remember that they are not Palestine. The Israeli government holds all the power, and is on them to stop the violence and show a true willingness for peace. Okay.
For the record, like this right here in May 15, 2021 is like 90% there. You know what I mean? It recognized the humanity of Palestinians. Like, yes, it's not like, it still treats Hamas as like an aberration, as a separate entity, as a group that, like, it doesn't come with the conclusion that like people that are pushed into a corner that feel like they have no way out of that corner were inevitably going to lash back, right? They're inevitably going to fight back to fight their way out of that corner.
So, just so it's not unambiguous.
Now, I wouldn't say this discussion was completely tame, as Ethan got quite caught up in the timing of it all, criticizing people for saying Free Palestine as the attacks were taking place.
I think what people don't understand when they say that is like what it means to somebody in Israel who's going through grieving right now of so many people around them and their life as it used to be. Nobody knows right now what to expect and how long this war is going to last. Like, when you come out and say Free Palestine after they just lost everybody, they have children taken away from them, that's not, if you're really for humanitarian reasons, that's not.
No, like I disagree with this. You know, much love to Gila, but I disagree with this sentiment. Saying Free Palestine in that moment it comes with the recognition of all of the things that happened on October 6th, on October 5, on October 4, on October 3rd. It comes with the recognition of, at the time, 75 years of apartheid, right? Like, that is the reality. This is exactly why I hate covering this issue, because Ethan's perspective on this matter is completely irrelevant to me, okay? It doesn't change the dynamic of geopolitics, okay? It doesn't change the dynamic of America's undying loyalty to continuing to facilitate the genocide in Gaza.